The house was too quiet when Naomi Bennett stepped through the front door that Thursday evening. She kicked off her heels and let them fall beside the entrance table, her feet aching from a 12-hour day at the office. The silence felt wrong somehow. Garrett's car was in the driveway, but none of the usual sounds greeted her. No television, no music, no running water from the shower he usually took after his evening run. She loosened her blazer and walked through the living room, past the kitchen where the morning's coffee cups still sat unwashed in the sink. Garrett had promised to handle the dishes. He hadn't. That was becoming a pattern lately. A lot of things were becoming patterns. The light was on in the home office at the end of the hall. That was where she found him. Garrett sat at the desk with his back to the door, his laptop open, his voice low and intimate in a way that made Naomi's stomach tighten before she even processed what she was seeing. The screen glowed blue in the dimming evening light, and on it was a woman. A beautiful woman with long auburn hair and a smile that was too familiar, too comfortable. "I can't wait either," Garrett was saying, his voice soft in that special way Naomi used to think was reserved for her. "Just a few more months and we won't have to hide anymore." Naomi's hand gripped the doorframe. She should have announced herself. She should have walked away. Instead, she stood frozen, watching her husband of 8 years lean closer to the screen like he wanted to climb through it. "I hate lying to her," the woman said, and Naomi could hear the false sympathy in her voice. "Does she suspect anything?" "Naomi?" Garrett laughed, actually laughed. "No. She's too busy with work. That company is like her real marriage. I'm just the guy who lives in her house." The words hit like physical blows. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. 8 years. 8 years of building a life together, of supporting his career when his startups failed, of putting his dreams before her own promotion opportunities. And this was what she got in return. "Poor thing," the woman said, but her smile said she didn't mean it at all. "When are you going to tell her about us?" "Soon," Garrett promised. "I'm just waiting for the right moment. My lawyer says I need to be strategic about it." His lawyer. He already had a lawyer. Naomi's eyes focused on the background behind the woman on the screen. There was a logo on the wall, a distinctive geometric design in blue and silver. TechVista Solutions. Her heart stuttered. She knew that logo. She had been staring at it all week during negotiations. TechVista Solutions was the mid-sized tech company her investment firm had just acquired. The acquisition had closed last Friday. 6 days ago. She was now, effectively, the boss of everyone who worked there, including, apparently, her husband's mistress. The woman shifted on screen, and Naomi caught a glimpse of a name placard on her desk. Sienna Brooks, Marketing Director. "I should go," Sienna said, glancing at something off-screen. "Someone might come by my office. Call me later?" "Always," Garrett said, and the tenderness in his voice made Naomi want to scream. They exchanged goodbyes that were too long, too sweet, too everything that Naomi's marriage had stopped being somewhere along the way without her noticing. Or maybe she had noticed. Maybe she had just been too busy, too focused on her career, too trusting to believe her husband would do this. The call ended. Garrett sat back in his chair and sighed, a smile playing on his lips. The smile of a man in love. The smile he used to give Naomi. She stepped back from the doorway, her mind racing. Her hand found her phone in her pocket. She needed to think. She needed to document everything. She needed to not fall apart right here in the hallway of the house she had bought with her own money from her own bonus 3 years ago. Naomi walked quietly back down the hall, grabbed her heels and slipped out the front door. She sat in her car in the driveway, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. The evening air was cool through the open window. Somewhere down the street, children were playing, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Normal life, continuing all around her while hers shattered into pieces. But as she sat there, something shifted inside her. The initial shock began to crystallize into something else. Something harder. Something calculating. She owned Sienna Brooks's company. She had signed the final acquisition papers herself. The deal was done, sealed, irreversible. TechVista Solutions and all its employees now answered to Bennett Capital Investments. They answered to her. Garrett had no idea. When she had told him about the acquisition last week, he had barely looked up from his phone. "That's great, honey," he had said, distracted, disinterested. He had no idea what company she had acquired. He never asked about her work anymore. Naomi opened her phone and pulled up her work email. She scrolled through until she found the employee directory for TechVista Solutions. There it was, Sienna Brooks, Marketing Director. Hired 2 years ago. Salary, $90,000 a year. Department, Marketing and Brand Development. Direct Supervisor, Harold Chin, VP of Marketing. She took a screenshot. Then she opened her personal photo gallery and started going through the pictures from the last few months. There, that photo from 2 months ago when she had grabbed Garrett's phone to show him something and seen a text notification from someone named S. He had snatched the phone back quickly, said it was a colleague. She had believed him. There, the credit card statement from 3 months ago with charges to a hotel downtown. He had said it was a work conference. She had been too busy with the Henderson merger to question it. There, the new cologne he had started wearing a month ago. The haircut that was suddenly more stylish. The gym membership he had suddenly taken seriously after years of her encouraging him to exercise. All the signs had been there. She had just been too trusting, too busy, too convinced that their marriage was solid to see what was right in front of her. Naomi took a deep breath and opened a new contact in her phone. She typed carefully, Miranda Stone, attorney at law. Miranda was the best divorce lawyer in the city. Naomi had recommended her to a colleague last year. Now she would need her for herself. But first she needed to go back inside and act normal. She needed to play this smart. Garrett thought she was clueless. He thought he was in control of this situation. He had no idea that the balance of power had just shifted completely. Naomi checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were dry. She had cried over Garrett before, when his second business had failed, when his father had died, when they had lost their first pregnancy 3 years ago. She had cried with him and for him. She wouldn't cry over him now. She got out of the car, slipped her shoes back on and walked back to the front door. She opened it loudly this time, called out a cheerful, I'm home, and listened as Garrett scrambled in the office, probably closing whatever he had been doing on his computer. Hey babe, he said, appearing in the hallway with a smile that looked genuine if you didn't know better. If you hadn't just watched him promise forever to someone else. How was work? Exhausting, Naomi said, setting her bag down and moving past him toward the kitchen. But good. The TechVista acquisition is going smoothly. We start integration next week. TechVista? He followed her into the kitchen. That's the company you just bought? Mom. She opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents without really seeing them. Mid-sized tech firm. About 200 employees. Should be a good investment. That's great. His voice was distracted already. His phone buzzed in his pocket. She saw him glance at it, saw the small smile that crossed his face before he caught himself. I'm going to order dinner, Naomi said. Ty okay with you? Sure. Whatever. He was already moving back toward the office. I've got some work to finish up. Right. Naomi ordered the food and then went upstairs to their bedroom. She opened her laptop and created a new folder on her desktop. She labeled it Legal Documents and started downloading and saving everything she could find. Bank statements, property records, credit card bills, tax returns. Every email where Garrett had asked her to invest in his ideas, to cover his debts, to pay for things because his accounts were temporarily short. She had been the primary earner in their marriage from day one. Garrett had grand ideas but terrible follow-through. She had supported him financially and emotionally, believing that's what partners did. That's what love was. She had been wrong. By the time the Thai food arrived, Naomi had compiled a comprehensive financial picture of their marriage. It was stark. Her name was on the house title. Her income had paid the mortgage. Her savings had bailed out his failed businesses. The car he drove was leased under her credit. Their joint accounts held her money. Garrett had contributed charm and promises and big dreams that never materialized. And now he was planning to leave her for a woman who worked at a company Naomi had just bought for $40 million. The irony would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. They ate dinner in front of the television, barely speaking. This had become their normal over the last 6 months. Naomi had thought they were just going through a rough patch. All marriages had them. She had been willing to work on it, to try harder, to make time for them despite her demanding job. But Garrett hadn't been going through a rough patch. He had been planning his exit. He had been building a new life with someone else while letting Naomi pay for the old one. I'm heading to bed, Garrett announced at 9 o'clock, kissing the top of her head absently. Early meeting tomorrow. Naomi doubted there was any meeting. More likely he wanted to call Sienna without Naomi around to overhear. She nodded and watched him go upstairs. She waited 30 minutes, then followed quietly. The bedroom door was closed. She could hear his voice through it, low and intimate. She didn't bother trying to listen. She already knew what he was saying. She had heard it all earlier. Instead, she went to the guest bedroom and sat on the bed in the dark. She pulled out her phone and sent an email to Miranda Stone. Need to schedule consultation. Urgent. Regarding divorce. The response came back within 10 minutes. Tomorrow at 8 a.m.? I can come to your office if you prefer privacy. Perfect, Naomi typed back. See you then. She looked at her phone for a long moment, then opened her work email again. She pulled up the TechVista Solutions organizational chart and studied it carefully. Sienna Brooks reported to Harold Chin, who reported to the COO, who reported to the interim CEO who was about to be replaced by Bennett Capital's chosen candidate next month. Naomi had complete oversight of the integration process. She had the authority to review all departments, all personnel files, all performance metrics. She could make changes. She could restructure. She could, if she found legitimate business reasons, terminate employees who weren't meeting standards or whose positions were redundant in the new structure. Everything by the book. Everything legal. Everything justified. She wasn't going to do anything rash. She wasn't going to let emotion drive her decisions. But she was going to protect herself, her assets, and her future. And if Sienna Brooks happened to discover that sleeping with other women's husbands had professional consequences, well, that would just be an unfortunate coincidence. Naomi set her phone aside and lay back on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. Her marriage was over. She had known it the moment she saw Garrett's face on that video call. The man she married didn't exist anymore if he ever had. In his place was a stranger who could lie to her face and plan his future with someone else while living in her house and spending her money. But she wasn't powerless. She wasn't going to fall apart. She had built her career from nothing, working twice as hard as her male colleagues to prove herself. She had negotiated million-dollar deals. She had saved failing companies. She had made tough decisions that affected hundreds of people. She could handle one cheating husband and his mistress. Naomi closed her eyes and breathed slowly. Tomorrow she would meet with Miranda. She would get legal advice. She would protect her assets. She would document everything. And then she would let Garrett ask for the divorce. Because he would. She had heard him tell Sienna he was waiting for the right moment. Well, she would give him his moment. She would let him think he was in control, that he was making the decisions, that he was getting away with it. And then, when he least expected it, he would discover that divorcing Naomi Bennett was the biggest mistake of his life. 1 week earlier, Naomi had walked into the conference room on the 42nd floor with her team trailing behind her. The view from Bennett Capital Investments overlooked the entire downtown district, a sprawling vista of glass and steel and ambition. It was the kind of view that reminded you what was possible if you worked hard enough and wanted it badly enough. She had wanted it. Badly. Good morning, gentlemen, Naomi said, taking her seat at the head of the long marble table. 4 men from TechVista Solutions sat across from her, their lawyer at the end. They looked nervous. They should be. Their company was bleeding money, and Bennett Capital was their last hope before bankruptcy. Ms. Bennett, their interim CEO said, a tired-looking man in his 60s named Robert Patterson. Thank you for meeting with us again. Of course. Naomi opened the folder in front of her and pulled out the revised offer her team had prepared. We've reviewed your financials in detail. I'll be frank, your company has strong bones but poor management. Your product development team is excellent. Your customer retention is solid. But your operating costs are unsustainable and your marketing spend is excessive for the returns you're seeing. The men shifted uncomfortably. The truth often had that effect. Our offer is $40 million, Naomi continued. That's down from our initial 45, reflecting the additional debt we discovered during due diligence. In exchange, Bennett Capital will inject $20 million in operating capital over the next 18 months, restructure your departments, and implement new leadership. Your employees will be retained where possible, though we will conduct performance reviews across all departments. And if we refuse? Asked the CFO, a man named Thomas whose brow was already sweating. Naomi smiled, but it wasn't warm. Then you can try to find another buyer. But we both know you've been shopping this company for 6 months. Bennett Capital is your best offer. It's also your last one. We're prepared to walk away if you can't commit today. She wasn't bluffing. She had 3 other potential acquisitions on her desk. TechVista was appealing, but it wasn't irreplaceable. That's what made her good at this. She never needed the deal more than the deal needed her. Robert exchanged glances with his team. Then he nodded slowly. We'll accept your terms. Excellent. Naomi pulled out the contract and slid it across the table. My legal team will coordinate with yours for the closing. We're looking at end of week if everyone moves efficiently. The meeting continued for another hour, hammering out details and timelines. Naomi's assistant, Patricia, took notes while her legal counsel, Andrew, fielded questions about the transition process. By the time they stood to shake hands, the deal was essentially done. "One thing," Naomi said as the TechVista team prepared to leave. "I'll need access to all personnel files and department budgets by Wednesday. I want to review them before we close." "Of course," Robert agreed. "I'll have my assistant send everything over." After they left, Naomi's team gathered around the table for a debrief. "That was masterful," Patricia said, grinning. "You had them from the moment you said you'd walk away." "They needed us more than we needed them," Naomi replied, but she felt the familiar thrill of a successful negotiation. This was what she was good at. This was where she felt in control. "Andrew, make sure the due diligence is airtight. I don't want any surprises after closing." "On it," Andrew said. "Though I have to say their books are pretty clean. The problems are operational, not ethical." That was good. Naomi didn't like inheriting scandals. She had enough to deal with turning around underperforming companies without adding legal nightmares to the mix. The personnel files arrived the next day, delivered in a secure digital folder that Patricia uploaded to Naomi's private server. Naomi spent Tuesday evening at home going through them. Garrett was out, another work dinner that she had stopped asking about months ago. The house was quiet, and she spread the files across her home office desk, reviewing each department systematically. The sales team was solid. The IT department was overstaffed but talented. Customer service needed work. And then there was marketing. Naomi pulled up the marketing department files and started reading. The VP, Harold Chin, seemed competent enough. His reports were thorough and his budgets, while high, showed clear ROI justifications. But as she dug deeper into the individual personnel files, she noticed something odd. The marketing director, Sienna Brooks, had expense reports that seemed excessive. Client dinners that were too frequent. Hotel stays in cities where TechVista didn't have clients. Conference attendance at events that didn't align with the company's industry. Naomi made a note to flag this for review. It could be legitimate. Sales and marketing often required travel and entertainment expenses. But it could also be someone taking advantage of loose oversight. She would investigate further after the acquisition closed. She clicked on Sienna's photo in the file. An attractive woman with long auburn hair and a bright smile stared back at her from the screen. Professional headshot, probably from the company website. She looked friendly and approachable. The kind of person who would be good in client-facing roles. Naomi closed the file and moved on to the next department. She didn't give Sienna Brooks another thought. She was just another employee in a company of 200. Just another file to review. Just another line item in the restructuring plan. By Wednesday, the legal teams were finalizing contracts. By Thursday, the money was being transferred. By Friday afternoon, the deal was done. Bennett Capital Investments owned TechVista Solutions. Naomi celebrated with her team at a downtown restaurant, drinks flowing and congratulations echoing around the table. She called Garrett from the bar to tell him the news. "That's great, honey," he said, his voice distant. "Sorry, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later?" "Sure," Naomi said, trying not to feel disappointed. This was a big deal. She had just closed a $40 million acquisition. But Garrett had been distracted for months now. She told herself it was just stress. Everyone went through rough patches. She went home that night feeling accomplished and lonely at the same time. The house was empty. Garrett didn't come home until after midnight. She was already asleep, or pretending to be, when he slipped into bed beside her without a word. Saturday they barely spoke. Sunday he claimed he had work to catch up on and spent the entire day in his home office with the door closed. Naomi did laundry and answered emails and tried not to think about how disconnected they had become. Monday morning she was back in her office at Bennett Capital, reviewing the integration timeline for TechVista. Her team had outlined a 6-month plan to streamline operations, reduce costs, and improve profitability. Phase 1 would involve department-by-department reviews starting next week. "I want to handle marketing personally," Naomi told Patricia during their morning briefing. "Something about their expenses doesn't sit right with me." "You think there's fraud?" Patricia asked, pulling up the relevant files on her tablet. "Maybe. Or just sloppy management. Either way, it needs attention." Naomi studied the numbers again. "Schedule meetings with the VP and each department head. I want to understand exactly where this money is going." Patricia made notes and sent out meeting requests. By the end of the day, Naomi had appointments scheduled with the entire marketing department over the next 2 weeks. Tuesday she was in meetings all morning about a different acquisition. Wednesday she fielded calls from investors about quarterly returns. Thursday, she reviewed contracts for a potential partnership. And Thursday evening, she came home to find her husband on a video call with one of her new employees, promising her forever and complaining about the wife who was too busy to notice his affair. Now, sitting in her office on Friday morning at 7:30, waiting for Miranda Stone to arrive, Naomi thought about the strange timing of it all. If she had acquired a different company, she never would have seen Sienna's name. If she hadn't come home early on Thursday, she might not have discovered the affair for months. If Garrett had been even slightly more careful, she could have been blindsided by divorce papers with no idea what was coming. Instead, she held all the cards. She knew about the affair. She owned the Mistress's company. She had control of the finances. And Garrett had no idea what was about to hit him. The elevator dinged and Miranda Stone stepped into the reception area. She was exactly what Naomi expected: sharp suit, sharper eyes, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Naomi," Miranda said, extending her hand. "Thank you for reaching out. Let's talk in your office." They settled into the leather chairs by Naomi's window. The morning sun was bright against the glass, painting everything in harsh, clear light. Naomi liked it. She was done with shadows and secrets. "Tell me everything," Miranda said, pulling out a legal pad and pen. So Naomi did. She told Miranda about the video call, about Sienna Brooks, about the 8 years of marriage and the lifetime of lies. She told her about the assets, all in her name. She told her about the failed businesses she had funded. She told her about the TechVista acquisition and the terrible timing that made all of this so much worse and so much better at the same time. Miranda listened without interrupting, taking notes in neat, precise handwriting. When Naomi finished, Miranda set down her pen and looked at her with something like admiration. "You've documented everything?" Miranda asked. "Everything I could find. Screenshots, bank records, emails, text messages." "Good. Here's what we're going to do." Miranda leaned forward. "You're going to let him ask for the divorce. Don't confront him about the affair yet. Let him think he's in control of the situation. When he presents you with papers, you're going to have your own already prepared. We'll file simultaneously, which means he can't surprise you or try to hide assets." "What about the house? The cars? The joint accounts?" "All in your name or primarily funded by you, which makes this much simpler. We'll do a full asset inventory, but based on what you've told me, you should be able to retain most of your property. He'll get whatever he came into the marriage with, which from what you've described isn't much." "And Sienna?" Naomi asked. "The fact that she works for my company now?" Miranda's smile was sharp. "That's a completely separate matter. Your professional obligations to Bennett Capital's acquisition have nothing to do with your personal life. If you discover performance issues or financial irregularities during your standard review process, you address them as you would with any employee. You document everything, follow HR protocols, and make decisions based on legitimate business concerns. So I can't fire her for sleeping with my husband." "Absolutely not. That would be personal retaliation and could expose you to a lawsuit." Miranda's eyes glinted. "But if you discover, through proper channels and documentation, that she's been misusing company resources or underperforming in her role, then you handle it as a business matter." Naomi nodded slowly. She understood. This had to be clean, professional, unimpeachable. "I'll draft divorce papers today," Miranda continued. "Keep copies in a safe place. When Garrett makes his move, call me immediately, day or night." "And Naomi?" Miranda's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry you're going through this. But from where I'm sitting, you're going to come out of this just fine. Better than fine, actually." After Miranda left, Naomi sat at her desk and stared out at the city. Somewhere down there, Garrett was probably at his meaningless job, texting Sienna and planning their future. Somewhere down there, Sienna was at TechVista Solutions, sitting in an office with a logo on the wall, completely unaware that her new boss was about to make her life very complicated. Naomi had built this career from nothing. She had clawed her way up through a male-dominated industry by being smarter, tougher, and more relentless than everyone around her. She had made difficult decisions. She had fired people. She had restructured companies. She had done what needed to be done, always within the rules, always by the book, always with documentation to back up every choice. This would be no different. She pulled up her calendar and confirmed next week's meetings with the TechVista marketing department. Everything would be professional. Everything would be proper. Everything would be documented. And if Garrett and Sienna's perfect little love story ended up collapsing under the weight of their own bad decisions, well, that wasn't Naomi's fault. That was just consequences. The weekend passed in a strange, surreal calm. Naomi moved through her house like a ghost in her own life, watching Garrett with new eyes. Every smile seemed calculated. Every word felt like a lie. He ordered pizza on Saturday night and they ate it while watching a movie neither of them cared about. He kissed her cheek before bed and she let him, her skin crawling at the casual intimacy of it. Sunday morning he went for a run and came back an hour later, sweating and smiling with his phone in his hand. She had seen him check it 3 times while tying his shoes. Probably texting Sienna. Probably counting down the days until he could be with her openly. Naomi spent Sunday afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, her laptop open, building a timeline. She started with the first signs she could remember, 6 months ago when he had started dressing better. 8 months ago when he had suddenly become interested in going to the gym. A year ago when he had stopped initiating any real conversations about their future together. She cross-referenced dates on credit card statements with his calendar. Business trips that seemed unnecessary. Late nights at work that became more frequent. The hotel charges she had noticed and dismissed as work conferences. It all lined up. The affair had probably started about 8 months ago, maybe longer. Right around the time Naomi had been promoted to senior director and her hours at the office had increased. Right when she had been most distracted, most consumed by work, most trusting that her marriage was solid. She screenshotted everything. Bank statements showing her income versus his. Property deeds in her name. Investment accounts she had built before and during the marriage. The prenuptial agreement she had insisted on 8 years ago, which Garrett had signed without much protest because he had nothing to protect back then. That prenup was going to save her now. It specified that assets brought into the marriage or earned individually during the marriage would remain separate property. Joint purchases would be split equitably based on contribution. Since Naomi had contributed approximately 90% of their joint finances over 8 years, equitable was going to heavily favor her. Monday morning, Naomi dressed in her sharpest suit, navy blue with a red silk blouse that meant business. She put on her favorite heels, the ones that made her 3 inches taller and made every step sound like a declaration. She applied her makeup with care, creating armor out of foundation and lipstick. Garrett was still asleep when she left. He had been sleeping later and later recently, now that he didn't bother pretending to care about his job. His position at a consulting firm was entry-level despite his age, a favor from a friend rather than something he had earned. He went to the office 3 days a week and worked from home the rest. Or worked, which apparently meant video calling his mistress. At Bennett Capital, Naomi threw herself into work. She had 3 meetings before lunch, all requiring her complete focus. She analyzed quarterly reports, strategized with her team about the next acquisition target, and reviewed integration progress on 2 other recent purchases. Being in her office, making decisions that affected millions of dollars and hundreds of jobs, this was where she felt powerful. This was where she was in control. At 1 p.m., Patricia knocked on her door. The TechVista department reports are in. Do you want to review them now or wait until the scheduled meetings? I'll look at them now, Naomi said. Send them over. The files appeared on her screen moments later. She pulled up the marketing department first, her jaw tight. The numbers were worse than she had initially thought. The department's budget had increased by 30% over the last year, but their measurable outcomes had declined. Client acquisition was down. Brand awareness campaigns had flopped. Social media engagement was stagnant. Meanwhile, expense reports showed a pattern of spending that made Naomi's trained eye narrow with suspicion. Dinners at expensive restaurants with vague descriptions like client entertainment. Hotel rooms booked for conferences that didn't appear on any industry calendar. Uber rides to residential addresses rather than business locations. Sienna Brooks's expense reports, in particular, showed charges that would require explanation. Either she was spectacularly bad at her job and wasting company money, or she was using company resources for personal purposes. Either way, it was a problem. Naomi created a new folder and started documenting everything. She pulled comparison reports from other marketing directors in Bennett Capital's portfolio. She researched industry standards for marketing expenses. She built a case file that had nothing to do with her personal life and everything to do with professional standards. If she was going to take action, it would be unassailable. Tuesday evening, Garrett came home late. Again. Naomi was in the living room, reading a book she wasn't actually processing, when he walked in at 9 p.m. Sorry, he said, not meeting her eyes. Work ran late. No problem, Naomi replied, her voice pleasant. Did you eat? Yeah, grab something at the office. Another lie. His office didn't have food services. He had been with Sienna. "How's the Henderson project going?" Naomi asked, naming a project she knew didn't exist. She wanted to see if he would even bother to maintain the lie. Good. Should wrap up soon." He was already moving toward the stairs. "I'm exhausted. Going to shower and crash." He disappeared upstairs and Naomi returned to her book, her face expressionless. Henderson project. He hadn't even blinked. He was so comfortable lying to her now that he didn't bother to keep his story straight. Wednesday morning, she found a text message on his phone. She hadn't meant to snoop, or maybe she had. The phone was on the kitchen counter while he showered, face up, and a message appeared on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear the blue dress I like." The message was from a contact labeled Sam. Naomi took a photo of the screen with her own phone, then went upstairs and got ready for work like nothing had happened. That evening, Garrett announced he had another work dinner. He left at 6:30 wearing cologne and the shirt Naomi had bought him for his birthday. She wondered if Sienna knew that his wife had picked out his wardrobe. If it bothered her at all that she was dating a married man who still lived with his wife, still slept in the same bed, still shared a life even if it was hollow. After he left, Naomi went to his office. She had resisted going through his things until now, wanting to respect some boundary even as he trampled all over theirs. But that was foolish. Respect was for relationships that deserved it. His laptop was password protected, but Naomi knew his passwords. He used the same 3 combinations for everything, including their wedding date. The irony was bitter. She found his email first. Messages from Sienna going back 8 months, just as she had suspected. The early ones were flirtatious but careful. By 6 months ago they had crossed every line. The messages were explicit, detailed, planning assignations at hotels and her apartment. Making promises about their future together. "Once you're free of her," Sienna had written 3 months ago, "we can really start our life together. I can't wait to be your wife." His wife. Sienna wanted to be his wife while Naomi still was his wife. Naomi's hands shook as she forwarded select emails to her own encrypted account. She documented everything: dates, times, locations. She took screenshots and backed them up in 3 separate secure locations. This was evidence for the divorce, for the lawyers, for the moment when Garrett would inevitably try to paint himself as the victim. She found his text messages next. Thousands of them with Sienna. Hundreds more deleting his location history and clearing his call logs. He had been methodical about covering his tracks, but not quite careful enough. One folder in his email was labeled legal. Naomi opened it. Inside were messages with a divorce attorney named Richard Frost. They had been corresponding for 2 months. Garrett had been getting advice on how to protect himself financially in a divorce, how to establish fault, how to make sure the split was favorable to him. "Since your wife is the primary earner," Richard had written, "you may be entitled to spousal support depending on your jurisdiction and the length of the marriage. I'll need detailed financial records to build your case." Garrett had been planning to ask her for alimony. After 8 years of her supporting his failed dreams and his lavish lifestyle on her dime, he was planning to divorce her and demand she continue paying for his life. Naomi sat back in his desk chair and laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound in the quiet office. The absolute audacity of this man. The sheer entitlement. She forwarded those emails to Miranda Stone with a short message. "He's planning to ask for spousal support." Miranda's response came back within minutes. "Don't worry. With your prenup and his employment status, he has no case. Document everything you're finding. This helps us." Naomi continued searching. She found a shared calendar with Sienna marking their meetings. She found photos he had hidden in a locked folder, pictures of them together, kissing, holding hands, playing happy couple. She found apartment listings he had saved, places he was planning to move into with Sienna after the divorce. By the time she heard his car in the driveway at 11 p.m., she had copied every relevant file and cleared all evidence of her searching. She closed his laptop, turned off the office light, and went upstairs to the guest bedroom where she had been sleeping for the past week, claiming his snoring was keeping her awake. He didn't question it. He probably preferred it. More time to text his girlfriend without his wife lying next to him. Thursday night, Naomi met with Miranda again at a discreet restaurant across town. She brought a USB drive with all the evidence she had compiled. "This is excellent documentation," Miranda said, scrolling through files on her tablet. "With this level of proof, the divorce will be straightforward. He's clearly engaged in an extramarital affair, he's consulted with an attorney about protecting his interests, and he's planning to leave. The prenup is ironclad. You'll retain your separate property, which is essentially everything. He might try to argue for joint assets, but there aren't many. What about the house? Naomi asked. Purchased with your money, title in your name. He has no claim. Same with the cars, the investments, the retirement accounts. It's all yours. Miranda looked up from the tablet. Naomi, I know this is painful, but from a legal standpoint, you're in an excellent position. He came into this marriage with nothing and contributed almost nothing. He leaves with nothing. When do you think he'll make his move? Based on his attorney's emails, I'd say within the next month. He's building his case, documenting what he thinks will help him. Let him. Everything he's doing just strengthens our position. Miranda closed the tablet. In the meantime, I need you to do something that might be difficult. You need to act completely normal. Don't confront him. Don't let on that you know. The more he thinks he's in control, the more mistakes he'll make. I can do that, Naomi said. She had been doing it all week. And the situation with Sienna Brooks at Tech Vista? I have my first meeting with the marketing department next week. I'm reviewing all personnel files and expense reports. If there are legitimate business reasons for action, I'll take them. Everything by the book. Good. Keep your personal and professional lives completely separate in terms of documentation. No emails about your marriage from your work computer. No discussions about Tech Vista with anyone involved in your divorce. We need clear boundaries. Naomi nodded. She understood. This had to be clean. No one could ever claim she had acted out of personal vengeance. Every decision had to be justified by business needs and professional standards. They finished dinner and parted ways. Naomi drove home through the quiet streets, her mind spinning. A month. She had maybe a month before Garrett would sit her down and tell her he wanted a divorce, probably with some speech about growing apart and needing different things. He would act like it was mutual, like they had both failed, like there was no villain in this story. She would let him have his speech. She would nod and look sad and sign his papers. And then she would hand him her own papers, prepared by the best divorce attorney in the city, outlining exactly how this was really going to go. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at her house. It was a beautiful home in a good neighborhood. She had bought it 3 years ago with her bonus. She had decorated it, maintained it, paid every bill. Garrett lived in her house like a guest who never left. Soon he would be gone. Soon this would just be her house again. Her space. Her peace. She could hardly wait. The moment came 3 weeks later on a Friday evening. Naomi had been expecting it, preparing for it, but when Garrett asked her to sit down in the living room because they needed to talk, her heart still stuttered in her chest. This was it. The conversation that would end 8 years of marriage and start something new. She sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully neutral. Garrett paced in front of the coffee table, his expression practiced in its solemnity. He had rehearsed this, she realized. He had probably written it out, maybe even run it past Sienna. Naomi, he began, and his voice was gentle, almost pitying. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About us. About our marriage. Okay, she said simply. She wasn't going to make this easy for him, but she wasn't going to be hysterical either. She was going to be calm, collected, and completely in control. I think we both know things haven't been good between us for a while now. He stopped pacing and looked at her. You're so focused on work. You're never here, not really. And I feel like we've grown apart. The word stung even though Naomi had known they were coming. She had been focused on work. She had been building a career, supporting them both, creating financial security while he bounced from one failed venture to another. But instead of appreciation, she got blamed for his infidelity. I see, Naomi said. I don't think either of us is happy anymore, Garrett continued. And I think it's time we were honest about that. I think we should get a divorce. There it was. The words hanging in the air between them. He looked nervous now, like he was worried about her reaction. Maybe expecting tears or begging her anger. Naomi took a slow breath. If that's what you want. He blinked, clearly surprised by her calm response. You're not upset? I'm sad, she said, which was true. She was sad about the loss of what she had thought they had. But she wasn't devastated. Devastation required surprise, and she had none left. But if you feel like this is the right decision, then I won't fight it. We're both adults. If the marriage isn't working, it isn't working. Garrett's relief was visible. His shoulders relaxed. His expression softened. He had expected a battle and instead got surrender. He thought he was winning. I appreciate you being so understanding, he said. I want this to be amicable. I don't want to fight over things or make this ugly. Neither do I. Naomi stood up. Have you spoken to an attorney? I have, yes. I can give you his information if you need help finding someone. How generous of him. That's fine. I'll find my own representation. Did you want to use a mediator or handle this through lawyers? I think lawyers would be cleaner, Garrett said. My attorney is drawing up papers. He should have them ready next week. That works for me. Naomi moved toward the stairs. I'm going to go read in the guest room. Let me know when dinner is ready. She walked away before he could respond, her head high, her step steady. Only when she was safely behind the closed door did she let herself breathe fully. Her phone was in her hand immediately. Miranda? It's happening. He just asked for a divorce. Perfect. Miranda's voice was crisp and professional. How did he seem? Confident. Relieved that I didn't fight it. He said his attorney is drawing up papers for next week. Good. I'll have ours ready by Monday. When he serves you, call me immediately. We'll file simultaneously. Are you okay? Naomi looked at herself in the mirror across the room. Her reflection showed a woman in control, perfectly composed, unbroken. I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. This is what I've been waiting for. Over the weekend, Garrett was almost cheerful. The tension that had been strung tight between them for months seemed to evaporate now that the truth was in the open, or at least his version of the truth. He hummed while making coffee on Saturday morning. He smiled at his phone constantly. He was probably texting Sienna, telling her the good news. Finally free. Finally theirs. Naomi maintained her composure. She went to the gym, ran errands, and had lunch with a colleague who had no idea her personal life was imploding. To the outside world, everything was normal. To Garrett, she was the understanding wife making the best of a difficult situation. Inside, she was counting down hours until Monday. Monday morning, Naomi's phone rang at 9 a.m. while she was in her office. It was Garrett's attorney, Richard Frost. His voice was smooth and professional as he informed her that he was emailing over divorce papers for her review. Ms. Bennett, I'm sure this is difficult, but my client is hoping we can handle this matter efficiently and amicably. If you could review the documents and have your attorney contact me, we can begin negotiations. I'll have my attorney reach out, Naomi said coolly. Thank you for the call. She hung up and immediately called Miranda. Papers just arrived. Mine are already prepared. Give me 20 minutes to file. Don't sign anything from his attorney. Don't even respond yet. Naomi opened the email from Richard Frost and read through the divorce petition Garrett had filed. It was everything Miranda had predicted. He was requesting spousal support citing the disparity in their incomes. He was claiming entitlement to half of all marital assets, conveniently forgetting that almost everything was her separate property under the prenup. He was portraying himself as a devoted spouse who had supported her career at the expense of his own. The audacity was almost impressive. Her phone rang again. Miranda. Filed. Your papers are officially submitted to the court. I'm emailing his attorney now to inform him that you have separate representation and have filed your own petition. He's going to be very surprised. I'm looking at his demands now, Naomi said. Spousal support and half the assets, which he's entitled to none of based on your prenup. My petition makes that very clear. We're asking for enforcement of the prenuptial agreement, division of the very minimal joint property based on actual contribution, and denial of all support claims based on his employment status and the marriage duration. How long does this usually take? With a solid prenup and clear documentation? We should have a settlement within 3 months, maybe sooner if he realizes he has no leverage. The only question is whether he'll try to fight it and waste everyone's time and money. Naomi suspected he would try. Garrett didn't like losing. But he was about to learn that wanting something didn't mean you deserved it. The call came at 2 p.m. Garrett, his voice tight with fury. What the hell, Naomi? You already had an attorney? You filed your own papers. You filed yours, she replied calmly. Did you expect me to wait around? You made it seem like you were fine with this. Like we were going to be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm following the prenup we both signed. I'm dividing assets according to actual contribution. I'm doing exactly what the law requires. Her voice never rose. If you don't like what my petition says, take it up with your attorney. You're asking for everything. The house, the cars, all the accounts. I'm asking for what's mine. The house is in my name, purchased with my money. The cars are leased under my credit. The accounts contain my earnings. If you bothered to read our prenup, you'd remember that we agreed to keep our assets separate. I supported your career. I took care of the house. Naomi almost laughed. You ordered takeout and occasionally ran the dishwasher. That's not supporting a career, Garrett. That's basic adult functioning. This is ridiculous. My attorney says I'm entitled to support. Your attorney is wrong. But please waste your money fighting it. I have all the documentation we need to prove exactly what you contributed to this marriage, which was almost nothing. She paused. Is there anything else? I have a meeting in 10 minutes. He sputtered on the other end, clearly not expecting her to be so cold, so completely unmoved by his anger. Finally he hung up without another word. Naomi set her phone down and allowed herself a small smile. That had felt good. Really good. For weeks she had been playing the role of the oblivious wife, the understanding partner, the woman who didn't realize she was being betrayed. Now the mask was off and Garrett was finally seeing who she really was. Someone who didn't lose. That evening she came home to find the house empty. Garrett's car wasn't in the driveway. Some of his clothes were gone from the closet. He had left, probably to Sienna's apartment, probably to cry about how his wife had turned out to be a cold-hearted witch who wouldn't just hand over everything he wanted. Naomi walked through the quiet rooms of her house and felt something loosen in her chest. This was what peace felt like. No more pretending. No more tension. No more watching a liar perform false affection. Just her space. Her home. Her life. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the back deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Her phone buzzed with an email from Patricia. TechVista marketing meeting scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. Full department review. Files attached. Naomi opened the attachment and began reading. Wednesday she would walk into that office and meet with Harold Chen and his team, including Sienna Brooks. They wouldn't discuss her personal life. They wouldn't mention Garrett. This would be strictly professional. But Sienna would know. The moment she saw Naomi sitting at the head of that conference table, she would know exactly who her new boss was. And she would understand that her comfortable little life was about to get very complicated. Naomi finished her wine and went inside to prepare. She had a divorce to finalize and a company to restructure. Neither task required emotion. Both required precision, documentation, and absolute professionalism. She had all three in abundance. 3 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings and business meetings. The divorce moved through the courts like clockwork. Garrett's attorney tried to fight the prenup, claiming it was signed under duress, but Miranda demolished that argument with signed documents, witness statements from the attorney who had drafted it, and evidence that Garrett had reviewed it for 2 weeks before signing. He tried to claim he deserved spousal support based on the years he had sacrificed for her career. Miranda presented his employment history showing he had never held a job longer than 18 months, had never earned more than $40,000 a year, and had never contributed meaningfully to the household expenses. He tried to argue for half the house. Miranda provided the property deed, mortgage payments exclusively from Naomi's account, and the prenup clause specifically protecting separate property. By December, the settlement was reached. Garrett got his personal belongings, his car, which was in his name but financed by Naomi, and $15,000 from their joint savings account, which represented approximately his total contribution over 8 years. Everything else stayed with Naomi. The divorce was finalized 2 days before Christmas. Naomi signed the papers in Miranda's office, her hands steady. She walked out of the building legally single for the first time in 8 years. She expected to feel something dramatic, relief or sadness or anger. Instead, she just felt lighter. Like she had put down a heavy bag she had been carrying too long. January brought a new year and new beginnings. At Bennett Capital, the TechVista integration was going well. Most departments had been streamlined. Performance was improving. The marketing department, however, remained under review. Naomi had met with Harold Chen and his team 3 times now. Each meeting had been professional and thorough. She had reviewed budgets, examined campaigns, analyzed ROI. The numbers told a clear story. The department was overstaffed for its output and certain expense patterns were concerning. Sienna Brooks had been present at 2 of those meetings. The first time, Naomi had watched recognition and horror dawn on the woman's face. Sienna had gone pale, her hands shaking slightly as she shuffled papers. She hadn't said much during that meeting, letting Harold do most of the talking. The second meeting, Sienna had tried to be professional. She presented campaigns she had worked on, defended her expense reports with explanations that sounded rehearsed. Naomi listened impassively and took notes. She asked pointed questions that Sienna struggled to answer. When had this client dinner occurred and what was the outcome? What measurable results came from that conference attendance? Why were there hotel charges in a city where TechVista had no clients? Sienna had no good answers. Harold looked uncomfortable. The other team members avoided eye contact. "Thank you for your time," Naomi had said at the end. "We'll review this information and get back to you regarding next steps." She had seen Sienna in the parking lot afterward, sitting in her car with her head in her hands. Naomi had driven past without a glance. That was 2 weeks ago. Now, in mid-January, Naomi was in her office reviewing the final analysis from her team when Patricia knocked on her door. "Have you seen this?" Patricia asked, holding out her phone. Naomi took it and looked at the screen. It was a social media post, a photo of Garrett and Sienna, both smiling broadly. Sienna's left hand was prominently displayed, showing an engagement ring. The caption read, "She said yes. Couldn't be happier to start this new chapter. #engaged, #new beginnings, #forever love." The post was from Garrett's account and had been shared by Sienna on hers. The comments were full of congratulations from friends who apparently had no idea he had only been divorced for 3 weeks. Or maybe they didn't care. People rarely did when a relationship drama wasn't their own. Naomi stared at the photo for a long moment. Garrett looked happy. Genuinely happy in a way he hadn't looked with her in years. Sienna was beaming, pressing her cheek to his, the ring catching the light. They had moved fast. 3 weeks from finalized divorce to engaged. They must have been planning it for months, waiting impatiently for the divorce to be over so they could start their real lives together. "I'm sorry," Patricia said softly. "That's insensitive of him to post it so publicly." Naomi handed back the phone. "It's fine. His life is his concern now." But it wasn't fine, not entirely. Not because she wanted Garrett back. That ship had sailed and sunk. But because seeing them so happy, so public about their love story, made her feel like the villain in their narrative. Like she was the obstacle they had overcome, the cold wife who hadn't appreciated him, the career woman who chose work over love. That afternoon, Naomi attended a board meeting where she presented TechVista's progress. One of the other board members, a man named Charles who had never liked her, made a comment during the break. "Sorry to hear about your divorce, Naomi. Rough timing with the holidays." "These things happen," she replied evenly. "I saw your ex-husband is already engaged." That was fast. Charles's tone was too casual, too interested. He smelled gossip. "Good for him," Naomi said. "Is there anything else you needed to discuss about the TechVista integration?" Charles smiled, recognizing he'd been shut down. "No, that's all. Great presentation, by the way." But the damage was done. By the end of the day, Naomi could feel the whispers following her through the office. People knew. Of course they knew. Garrett's engagement announcement had made the rounds. Some of her colleagues had probably connected the dots: TechVista employee, Naomi's recent divorce, the rushed engagement. She was being pitted. She hated it. That evening, she went home to her empty house and poured herself a glass of wine. She looked at her phone and, against her better judgment, pulled up Garrett's social media. The engagement post had hundreds of likes now. Friends and family celebrating their love. People she had spent holidays with, people who had attended their wedding, people who were now acting like that marriage had never mattered. One comment caught her eye. It was from Garrett's mother. "So happy for you both. We always knew you deserved someone who understood you." Naomi read that line 3 times. She had helped Garrett's mother through her husband's death. She had paid for the funeral when Garrett couldn't afford it. She had visited every week for months afterward, bringing groceries and sitting with her. And now she was implying that Naomi had never understood her son. She set the phone down before she could read more. This was the problem with divorce. Everyone picked sides, rewrote history, decided who was the hero and who was the villain based on incomplete information and their own biases. Her phone rang. "Miranda." "I saw the engagement announcement," Miranda said without preamble. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't have to be fine. It's okay to be angry about this." Naomi leaned back on her couch and stared at the ceiling. "I'm angry. Not because I want him back, but because they get to be happy while I'm the bad guy. Everyone's talking about how I was too focused on my career, how I neglected him, how she's so much better for him. And nobody knows the truth. The truth is you supported a grown man for 8 years while he failed at everything and cheated on you," Miranda said firmly. "The truth is you had every right to protect your assets in the divorce. The truth is they're celebrating a relationship that started while he was still married to you. None of that makes you a villain. It doesn't feel that way when I'm at the office and people are looking at me like I'm some corporate ice queen who drove her husband away. Let them think what they want. The people who matter know the truth. And more importantly, you know the truth." Miranda paused. "Besides, I'd be more concerned about their future than your reputation. Relationships that start as affairs tend to have complications." Naomi knew that was probably true. But right now, in this moment, it didn't feel like enough. She wanted vindication. She wanted everyone to know what Garrett had done, what he really was. She wanted to stop being the sympathetic failure in this story. But she couldn't control the narrative. She could only control her actions. And her actions needed to remain above reproach. The next morning, she walked into Bennett Capital with her head high. She wore her most powerful suit and her most confident smile. When colleagues offered condolences or asked tentative questions, she responded with professionalism. "I'm doing well, thank you for asking. The divorce was mutual and amicable. I wish them both happiness." Lies, all lies. But they were the right lies to tell. The ones that made her look mature and unaffected. At 10 a.m., she had another meeting with the TechVista executive team. They were discussing the final phase of integration and the personnel changes that would accompany it. "The marketing department requires restructuring," Naomi told them. "Our analysis shows redundancy in several positions and continued performance issues despite intervention. I'm recommending we eliminate 3 positions and redistribute responsibilities." Harold Chin nodded slowly. He had seen this coming. Which positions? 2 junior marketing associates and the director position. The director role will be consolidated with the VP role for now, with Harold assuming those responsibilities. If we determine we need a separate director in 6 months, we'll reevaluate. "That's going to be difficult for morale," the COO said. "I understand. But the department is underperforming and over budget. These changes are necessary for the company's health." Naomi kept her voice steady and professional. "HR will handle all terminations according to protocol. We'll provide severance packages and outplacement services." The meeting continued with discussion of other departments. When it ended, Naomi returned to her office and reviewed the termination paperwork that HR had prepared. Sienna Brooks's name was at the top of the list. It was completely justified. The director position truly was redundant. Sienna's performance reviews were mediocre at best. Her expense reports were still questionable. Every metric supported this decision. But Naomi knew how it would look if anyone connected the dots. The ex-wife firing the new fiancé. Corporate revenge disguised as business strategy. She called Miranda. "I need you to review something. I want to make absolutely sure this is legally sound and can't be challenged as retaliation." She sent over all the documentation, performance reviews, expense reports, departmental analysis, industry comparisons. Everything that justified eliminating Sienna's position. Miranda called back an hour later. "This is solid, Naomi. The business justification is clear. The decision is defensible. If anyone questions it, you have documentation showing this was based entirely on legitimate business concerns." "I need this to be perfect," Naomi insisted. "I can't have any appearance of personal motivation." "It is perfect. You've done everything right. Now you have to trust that." Naomi hung up and signed the termination approval. The papers went to HR, who would schedule the meeting with Sienna for the following week. She should have felt satisfied. This was part of her revenge, not just the divorce settlement, but the complete dismantling of the comfortable life Sienna had built while sleeping with someone else's husband. But instead, Naomi just felt tired. This whole situation was exhausting. The legal battles, the workplace whispers, the social media announcements. She wanted it to be over. She wanted to move forward. She wanted to stop being defined by this divorce and start being known for something else. But first, she had to finish what she started. The termination meeting was scheduled for Wednesday at 2 p.m. Naomi wouldn't be present. That was HR's responsibility. But she knew when it was happening. She watched the clock in her office and imagined the scene playing out 23 floors below in the TechVista building. Patricia brought her coffee at 1:45. The HR team left for TechVista 10 minutes ago. "Thank you." Naomi wrapped her hands around the warm cup and stared out her window. The sky was bright and clear, afternoon light reflecting off the glass towers that made up the city's skyline. Beautiful and impersonal. At 3:15 her phone buzzed. A text from Robert Patterson, the former TechVista CEO who now served as a senior advisor. "Terminations completed." Brooks took it hard. Security had to escort her out. Naomi read the message twice, then deleted it. She didn't want details. Didn't want to imagine Sienna crying or arguing or whatever reaction she had. This was business. It had to stay business. But the human part of her, the part she tried to suppress during work hours, felt a twinge of something. Not guilt exactly. Sienna had made her choices. She had knowingly pursued a married man. She had participated in the deception. She had celebrated their engagement publicly while Naomi's colleagues whispered about the scandal. So, losing a job was hard. Even when you deserved it. Naomi pushed the thought away and returned to work. She had 3 other meetings that afternoon and a conference call with investors in Tokyo. Her personal drama couldn't interfere with her professional responsibilities. The call to her cell came at 5:30, just as she was wrapping up for the day. A known number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "You vindictive witch." Sienna's voice was raw with tears and rage. "You fired me because of Garrett. Because you're jealous that he chose me." Naomi closed her office door and spoke quietly. "Sienna, you were terminated because your position was redundant and your performance was below standard. This had nothing to do with my personal life. That's bullshit and you know it. You've had it out for me since the merger. You've been looking for excuses. I've been doing my job, which is to make TechVista profitable. That required restructuring. I'm sorry you were affected, but the decision was based entirely on business metrics. I'm calling a lawyer. This is retaliation and discrimination, and I'll sue you and your whole company. You're welcome to pursue legal action if you feel your termination was unjust. All our documentation is available for review." Naomi's voice remained calm, professional. "But I'd recommend speaking to your attorney before making accusations. Employment law is complicated. Garrett was right about you. You're cold. You care more about money and power than people. That's why he left you." The words stung more than Naomi wanted to admit. "If there's nothing else, I need to go. Your severance package includes outplacement services. I hope you find something new quickly." She hung up before Sienna could respond. Her hands were shaking. She set the phone down and took several deep breaths. Cold, calculating, career-obsessed. These were the words people used to describe women who succeeded in business. Men with the same qualities were called ambitious and strategic. But women were cold. Her phone rang again. Garrett this time. She didn't answer. He called 3 more times. Left angry voicemails she deleted without listening to. Sent text messages demanding she call him back. Finally, she replied with a single message. "Legal issues regarding TechVista should go through our respective attorneys. Don't contact me directly again." She blocked his number. She should have done that months ago. Patricia knocked softly and opened the door. "Everything okay? You look upset." "I'm fine," Naomi said automatically. Then she reconsidered. Patricia had been her assistant for 4 years. She was discreet and loyal and had seen Naomi through multiple crises. "Actually, I'm not fine. But I will be." Patricia came in and closed the door behind her. "The Brooks termination?" "She called me. Garrett too. They're angry." "They have every right to be angry," Patricia said. "But not at you. They created this situation. They made choices that had consequences. That's not your fault. Everyone's going to think I did it out of revenge. Some people will think that. Others will look at the documentation and see it was a justified business decision. The people who matter, your bosses, your colleagues who understand finance, they'll know you did the right thing." Patricia sat in the chair across from Naomi's desk. "Can I be honest with you? Please. I think you're being too hard on yourself. You're so determined to be perfect, to never let emotion influence your decisions, to be above reproach. But Naomi, you're human. You're allowed to be angry that your husband cheated on you. You're allowed to feel satisfied that his mistress faced professional consequences for her poor performance. Those feelings don't make you a bad person." Naomi looked down at her hands. "I don't want to be the kind of person who uses power for personal revenge." "You're not. You made a business decision that happened to affect someone who hurt you personally. That's different. If Sienna had been a stellar employee with perfect records, would you have kept her on staff just to avoid looking petty? No. I would have found a different position to eliminate." "Exactly. Because this was about business. The fact that it also removed a problematic person from your professional sphere is just a bonus." Patricia smiled slightly. "Stop beating yourself up for being good at your job." After Patricia left, Naomi sat alone in her office as the sun set outside her window. The city lights began to twinkle on, thousands of lives being lived in those buildings. People going home to families, to partners, to empty apartments. Everyone dealing with their own complications and heartbreaks and triumphs. She wasn't special. Her divorce wasn't unique. Her pain wasn't exceptional. But it was hers and she was allowed to feel it without shame. Her work phone rang. It was Andrew, her legal counsel. "We received notice from Sienna Brooks's attorney," he said. "They're threatening to file a wrongful termination suit." Naomi's stomach tightened. Do they have a case? Not based on what I've reviewed. The business justification is solid, and we followed all proper procedures. But they might file anyway, hoping to force a settlement. Then we fight it. I'm not settling. Let them examine every document. Let them depose every witness. We did this by the book. That's going to cost money and legal fees. I don't care. I'm not giving them a cent just to make this go away. If they want to fight, we'll fight. Andrew chuckled. That's what I wanted to hear. I'll draft our response. Don't worry, Naomi. We've got this. The weeks that followed were tense. Sienna's attorney did file suit, claiming retaliation and discrimination. Bennett Capital's legal team responded with a mountain of documentation. Performance reviews, expense audits, departmental analyses, industry comparisons. Everything showed that Sienna's termination was justified by legitimate business concerns. The attorney tried to establish a connection between Naomi's personal life and the professional decision. But there was none to find. Naomi had never mentioned her marriage in any work communication. She had never discussed Garrett or Sienna with TechVista employees. She had maintained complete separation between her personal drama and her professional responsibilities. By March, Sienna's attorney was quietly suggesting they drop the case. There was no evidence of retaliation. Bennett Capital's documentation was impeccable. Pursuing this further would only cost Sienna more money she didn't have. The suit was withdrawn in early April with no settlement and no admission of wrongdoing from Bennett Capital. Naomi received the news in an email from Andrew and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was over. Finally over. That evening, she treated her team to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. They celebrated the successful TechVista integration, which was now showing profit growth for the first time in 2 years. No one mentioned the lawsuit or the drama. They just enjoyed good food and better company, toasting to their success. Naomi looked around the table at her team, Patricia, Andrew, and 4 other executives who had worked tirelessly on the acquisition. These people had her back. They respected her work. They knew her worth wasn't defined by her marriage or divorce. Thank you, she said, raising her glass, for all your hard work on this project. TechVista is successful because of what you all contributed. Here's to many more wins together. They clinked glasses and drank, and Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in months. Pure professional pride untainted by personal complications. She was good at her job. Really good. The TechVista acquisition proved it. The successful defense against the lawsuit proved it. Her growing reputation in the industry proved it. Garrett could have his engagement in his new life. Sienna could move on to another job. Naomi had what mattered, her career, her integrity, her independence. And that was worth more than any marriage built on lies. The formal confrontation that Naomi had been dreading never quite materialized in the dramatic way she imagined. Instead, it happened in pieces, small encounters and distant observations that built toward an inevitable conclusion. May brought warmer weather and busier schedules. Naomi threw herself into work with renewed energy. The TechVista success had caught the attention of other companies looking for Bennett Capital to invest in their restructuring. She was meeting with potential clients 3 times a week, evaluating opportunities, building her portfolio. It was at one of these meetings that she saw them. She was having lunch with a potential client at a restaurant downtown when Garrett and Sienna walked in. Naomi's hand tightened on her water glass, but she didn't look away. She watched as the hostess seated them 3 tables over. Watched as Garrett pulled out Sienna's chair. Watched as they settled in, close and intimate, completely absorbed in each other. Sienna saw her first. Naomi caught the moment recognition hit, the widening eyes, the hand on Garrett's arm, the whispered words. Garrett looked up and his expression hardened when he spotted her. Naomi returned her attention to her client, a woman named Jennifer who ran a struggling software company. As I was saying, the key to successful restructuring is understanding which assets are worth preserving and which are holding you back. And how do you determine that? Jennifer asked, oblivious to the drama unfolding nearby. Data analysis, performance metrics, honest assessment of value versus cost. Naomi continued explaining her process, hyper-aware of Garrett and Sienna watching from across the restaurant. The meal passed in professional conversation. Naomi never looked their way again, though she felt their stares like heat on her skin. When the check came, she paid it and stood to leave. She had to walk past their table to reach the exit. As she approached, Sienna's voice cut through the ambient restaurant noise. Must be nice having all that money to throw around. Wonder whose work actually earned it. Naomi stopped, turned, looked directly at Sienna for the first time since the termination. Excuse me? You heard me. Sienna's face was flushed, her eyes bright with anger or wine or both. You walk around like you're so successful, but you just steal other people's companies and fire hard-working people to make yourself look good. Garrett put a hand on Sienna's arm. Don't. But Sienna shook him off. No, she needs to hear this. She ruined my career because she was jealous. She couldn't stand that Garrett chose me over her. The restaurant had gone quiet. People at nearby tables were watching with undisguised interest. Jennifer stood a few feet away, clearly uncomfortable. Naomi could have walked away. Should have walked away. But months of whispers and accusations and controlled responses had built up inside her, and something finally snapped. I didn't ruin your career, Naomi said, her voice calm but cold. Your career was failing long before I entered the picture. Your performance reviews were mediocre. Your expense reports were questionable. Your department was over budget and underperforming. I simply made a business decision based on data and professional standards. That's bullshit. It's documentation, Naomi interrupted. Everything I did was reviewed by legal counsel, HR, and the board. If you think it was personal retaliation, you already tried suing. How did that work out for you? Sienna's face went pale, then red. Garrett stood up. That's enough. Let's go. But Naomi wasn't finished. Months of being painted as the villain, the cold corporate ice queen who drove her husband away, came pouring out. You want to talk about stealing? You pursued a married man. You participated in a relationship built on lies and cheating. You helped him spend money I earned while planning your future together. Naomi's voice never rose, but it cut like a blade. And when he finally left me for you, when he asked for a divorce while already engaged to you, you celebrated it publicly. So don't stand there and talk to me about ethics or fairness. He was unhappy, Sienna shot back. He was trapped in a loveless marriage with someone who cared more about work than her own husband. He was supported, Naomi corrected. For 8 years I paid for his life. His failed businesses. His expenses. His dreams that never materialized. I invested in him emotionally and financially while building my career. And when I was working, he was video calling you, planning his exit, consulting lawyers about how to take as much from me as possible when he left. Garrett stepped between them. Stop it. Both of you. Naomi looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the divorce. He seemed smaller somehow. Less significant. The man she had loved and trusted for 8 years had become a stranger whose opinion no longer mattered. You're right, Naomi said. This is pointless. You two deserve each other. Enjoy your life together. She turned and walked out, Jennifer hurrying behind her. I'm so sorry about that, Jennifer said once they were on the sidewalk. That must have been awful. It was clarifying, Naomi replied. Sometimes you need to say things out loud to realize how true they are. They parted ways and Naomi returned to her office. Her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline, but her head was clear. That confrontation had been building for months. She hadn't planned it, hadn't wanted it, but now that it was done she felt lighter. She had said her piece. She had defended herself. She had stopped being the silent victim in their narrative. Patricia knocked on her door an hour later. I heard about the restaurant. Are you okay? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Naomi smiled wryly. I might have broken my own rule about staying above it all, but it felt good to finally tell the truth. Good for you. They deserved it. Patricia hesitated. For what it's worth, I think you handled that with remarkable restraint. If someone said that to me, I would have thrown a drink in their face. Tempting. But I like my suits too much to risk the dry cleaning bill. They both laughed, and Naomi realized it was the first time in months she had genuinely laughed about anything related to the divorce. That evening she got a text from an unknown number. You embarrassed Sienna in public. That was cruel and unnecessary. Garrett. Naomi stared at it for a long moment, then blocked that number too. She was done with his attempts to make her feel guilty for standing up for herself. Done with him trying to control the narrative. The next morning there was a voicemail from Miranda. I heard about yesterday. Just calling to make sure you're okay and to remind you not to engage with them again. The divorce is final, the lawsuit is dismissed. You don't owe them anything, not apologies, not explanations, not responses. Stay strong. Naomi saved the message. Miranda was right. This was the last time she would let Garrett and Sienna provoke a reaction. They were her past. She needed to focus on her future. But the confrontation had done something unexpected. Word spread quickly through the professional community, not the details but the general story. The ex-wife who had caught her successful husband cheating, handled the divorce with grace, survived a baseless lawsuit, and then finally spoke her truth when pushed too far. Suddenly, Naomi wasn't the corporate ice queen anymore. She was a woman who had been wronged but refused to be a victim. A professional who had maintained her integrity despite personal attacks. A success story about resilience and boundaries. Her phone started ringing with interview requests. Business magazines wanted to profile her. Professional organizations invited her to speak about leadership and ethics. The narrative was shifting and she was no longer the villain. She declined most of the interview requests. She didn't want to be known for her divorce. But she accepted a few speaking engagements, focusing on business strategy and professional decision-making rather than personal drama. At one such event in late May, she gave a talk about ethical leadership in corporate restructuring. She spoke about the importance of documentation, of separating personal feelings from professional responsibilities, of making hard decisions for the right reasons. After her talk, several women approached her privately. They shared their own stories, divorces, betrayals, professional setbacks caused by personal complications. They thanked her for showing that it was possible to maintain integrity while protecting yourself. "You didn't let them make you small," one woman said. "You didn't hide or apologize or pretend it didn't hurt. You just kept being excellent at your job." That stuck with Naomi. She hadn't let them make her small. Despite everything, she had continued doing what she was good at, building her career, creating value, proving her worth had nothing to do with her marriage. June arrived with summer heat and new opportunities. Naomi signed 2 new clients and closed another successful acquisition. Her reputation was stronger than ever. Her team was thriving. Her life was moving forward. She heard through the professional grapevine that Sienna had found a new job at a smaller company with a significant pay cut. That Garrett was struggling with his own job, having burned bridges by taking so much time off during the divorce. That their engagement had been postponed indefinitely due to financial concerns. Naomi felt nothing when she heard this news. Not satisfaction or vindication or even curiosity. Just nothing. They were no longer relevant to her life. She had confronted them, spoken her truth and moved on. That chapter was closed. Now she was writing new chapters. Better ones. Ones where she was the hero of her own story. The summer passed in productive heat. Naomi's calendar filled with meetings and negotiations and success stories. She worked long hours by choice rather than avoidance, genuinely enjoying the challenges of her job. The divorce was behind her. The lawsuit was dismissed. The confrontation had brought closure. Life, it seemed, was finally moving forward. It was in mid-July that she started hearing the rumors. Whispers at industry conferences. Careful comments from colleagues who shared mutual acquaintances with Garrett. Stories that trickled back through the professional network about trouble in paradise. Sienna and Garrett were fighting constantly. Money was tight. The wedding planning had stalled. The apartment they shared was small and poorly maintained. Garrett's job situation remained precarious. Sienna's new position wasn't working out. Naomi heard these things and felt only distance. Their problems weren't her concern. She had her own life to focus on. But then Patricia came into her office one Wednesday morning with an unusually serious expression. "Garrett tried to call the main line asking for you. Security turned him away, but he left a message." Patricia set a note on Naomi's desk. "He wants you to help Sienna get her job back. Says you have influence and could make a call." Naomi read the note and laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "He wants me to help his fiancée get rehired at a company I don't even directly manage anymore? After everything?" That's what he said. The message mentioned doing the right thing and not holding grudges. Incredible. Naomi crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. "Tell security if he tries again, they're not to pass along messages. He has no business contacting me." Already done. But Garrett apparently wasn't willing to take no for an answer. He showed up at Bennett Capital's building on Friday afternoon. Security called Naomi's office to inform her that a Mr. Garrett Phillips was in the lobby demanding to see her. "Tell him I'm unavailable," Naomi said. 10 minutes later, Patricia informed her that he was still there, growing agitated. "Security is concerned he might cause a scene." Naomi closed her laptop and stood. "Fine. I'll talk to him in the lobby. Call Andrew and have him come down too. I want a witness." She took the elevator down with Andrew trailing behind, his legal pad in hand. When the doors opened, she saw Garrett pacing near the security desk. He looked different from the last time she had seen him. Thinner. Tired. His clothes were wrinkled and his hair needed cutting. "Naomi," he said when he spotted her. "Thank God. I need to talk to you." "You can speak to my attorney," Naomi said coolly. I have no reason to talk to you directly. Please. This is important. His voice carried a desperation that might have moved her once. Now it just irritated her. Sienna lost her new job. She's been out of work for 3 weeks. She applied back at Tech Vista, but they won't even give her an interview. I know you have connections there. I know you could help if you wanted to. Naomi stared at him. You want me to help the woman you cheated on me with get a job? I know how it sounds, but do you? Naomi's voice was sharp. Because it sounds like you have no concept of appropriate boundaries or basic human decency. You cheated on me with her. You divorced me to be with her. She tried to sue my company for wrongful termination. And now you want me to use my professional reputation to help her? She's struggling, Naomi. We both are. I thought you were better than holding grudges. This isn't about grudges. This is about reality. Naomi crossed her arms. Sienna was terminated for legitimate performance issues. She subsequently filed a baseless lawsuit that cost both her and my company time and money. No company wants to hire someone with that history. That's a consequence of her own choices. You ruined her career. No. She ruined her own career by sleeping with her boss's ex-husband and then trying to sue when she faced professional consequences. Naomi's voice never rose, but it was ice cold. I made a business decision. She made it personal. That's not my fault. Garrett's face flushed with anger. I knew you'd be like this. Cold and calculating. No wonder I fell out of love with you. Garrett, you were never in love with me. You were in love with my bank account and what it could provide for you. Naomi finally let herself say what she had been thinking for months. You married me because I was successful and you were broke. You stayed with me because I paid for your life. You left me when you found someone else to support you. But Sienna doesn't make what I make, does she? And now you're discovering that love doesn't pay the rent. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You consulted with a lawyer about getting alimony from me. I have the emails. You tried to take half of everything I had earned. When that didn't work, when you ended up with almost nothing in the divorce, you convinced yourself it was because I was vindictive. But it was just the law. It was just consequences. Security had moved closer, sensing the conversation was escalating. Andrew had his hand on Naomi's arm, a gentle reminder to stay calm. You need to leave, Andrew said to Garrett. You're on private property and Ms. Bennett has asked you not to contact her. I just need. You need to leave, Andrew repeated, firmer this time. If you contact Ms. Bennett again, we'll file a restraining order for harassment. Do you understand? Garrett looked between them, his expression desperate and angry and defeated all at once. You're really going to do this? You're going to let us struggle when you could help? I'm going to live my life without any obligation to my ex-husband and his affair partner, Naomi said. What happens to you now is not my concern. You made your choices. These are your consequences. She turned and walked back to the elevator, Andrew beside her. Behind them, security was escorting Garrett toward the exit. She heard him say something else, but the elevator doors closed and cut off his words. Back in her office, Naomi sat at her desk and let herself shake. Her hands trembled as she poured water from the bottle on her desk. Andrew sat across from her, watching with concern. Are you okay? He asked. I'm angry, Naomi admitted. The audacity of him showing up here, demanding I help her after everything they did. Like I owe them something. Like I'm the bad guy for not bailing them out of the mess they created. You handled that perfectly. You stated clear boundaries and didn't engage with his manipulation. He called me cold. He's projecting. He wants you to feel guilty so you'll do what he wants. Andrew leaned forward. Naomi, you don't owe them anything. Not help, not forgiveness, not even basic civility at this point. They burned that bridge themselves. She nodded, knowing he was right but still feeling the sting of Garrett's words. Cold. Calculating. The same accusations thrown at successful women for generations. That evening, alone in her house, Naomi poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her back deck. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Her yard was perfectly maintained, the lawn green and lush. Everything about her life was orderly and successful and completely under her control. Was that cold? Was taking care of herself and refusing to help people who had hurt her somehow wrong? She pulled out her phone and called her best friend Rachel, someone she had known since college who lived across the country now. Tell me honestly, Naomi said after explaining the situation. Am I a terrible person for not helping them? Are you kidding? Rachel's voice was incredulous. Naomi, that man cheated on you, tried to steal your money in the divorce, and now wants you to use your reputation to help his mistress? Tell me you didn't actually consider it. I didn't, but his words got to me. The cold, calculating thing. Oh, please. You know what men call women who protect themselves? Cold. You know what they call women who set boundaries? Calculating. It's manipulation. Don't fall for it. I don't want to be vindictive. I don't want my decisions to be driven by revenge. They're not. Refusing to help someone who wronged you isn't revenge. It's common sense. You're not actively trying to hurt them. You're just declining to save them from their own consequences. That's healthy boundaries, not vindictiveness. After they hung up, Naomi felt better. Rachel was right. She wasn't obligated to rescue Garrett and Sienna from their own bad decisions. She had every right to focus on her own life and career without guilt. The following week, she heard through another colleague that Garrett had tried to contact 2 other women at Bennett Capital, hoping one of them would intercede with Naomi on Sienna's behalf. Both had refused and reported the contact to HR. HR sent Naomi a formal request. Did she want to pursue a restraining order against her ex-husband? She considered it. The repeated contact was borderline harassment. But a restraining order would be public record. It would become another story for people to whisper about. No, she told Andrew. Just document everything and keep security informed. If he shows up again, we'll reconsider. He didn't show up again. The calls and messages stopped. Either Garrett had finally gotten the message, or he had found another target for his desperation. Naomi didn't care which. She was done thinking about him. Done letting his drama intrude on her peace. Done feeling guilty for protecting herself. August arrived with thunderstorms and new projects. Naomi was busier than ever, which was exactly how she liked it. Work was concrete, measurable. She could see the results of her efforts in profit margins and successful integrations and companies saved from bankruptcy. This was her life now. Clean, professional, focused. No complications. No betrayals. No more pretending that marriage meant anything other than legal entanglement. She was better off alone. She was certain of it. Or at least, she told herself that with enough conviction to almost believe it. September brought cooler weather and a business conference in Chicago. Naomi almost skipped it. She was tired of traveling, tired of networking events, tired of the performance of professional socializing. But Patricia had already booked the tickets, and the conference featured several panels on acquisition strategy that were relevant to her work. So she went. The conference was held at a sprawling hotel near Lake Michigan. Naomi checked in, reviewed her schedule, and prepared for 3 days of presentations and small talk. The first day passed in a blur of panels and keynote speeches. She took notes, made a few useful contacts, and retired to her room early. The second day started with a breakfast panel on ethical leadership in corporate restructuring. Naomi was one of 4 speakers, discussing the TechVista acquisition without mentioning any of the personal drama. She spoke about maintaining professional standards, documenting decisions, balancing profit motives with employee welfare. After the panel, several people approached her with questions and business cards. She was fielding one particularly detailed question about integration timelines when she noticed a man waiting patiently at the edge of the group. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, with silver threading through his dark hair. Well-dressed in a tailored suit that suggested success without ostentation. He waited until the crowd dispersed before approaching. Miss Bennett? I'm Julian Reeves. I really enjoyed your presentation. He extended his hand and she shook it, noting the firm grip and warm smile. Your approach to restructuring is refreshingly ethical. Too many firms prioritize profit over people. Thank you, Naomi said, taking his offered business card. Julian Reeves, CEO, Reeves Technology Consulting. Though I'd argue profit and people don't have to be mutually exclusive. Treating employees well usually improves the bottom line long term. I completely agree. Which is rare in our industry. He gestured toward the hotel restaurant. I know this is forward, but would you have time for coffee? I have some questions about your acquisition strategy that might be relevant to a situation my company is dealing with. Naomi hesitated. She had learned to be cautious about business meetings that started as casual coffee invitations. But Julian's demeanor was professional, his interest seemed genuine, and the restaurant was public and crowded. Sure, she said. I have an hour before my next commitment. Over coffee, Julian explained his situation. His consulting firm had been approached by a mid-sized company looking for help restructuring their IT department. The company was struggling financially but had strong underlying fundamentals. Exactly the type of situation Naomi specialized in. The challenge is they've been mismanaged for years, Julian said. The employees are talented but demoralized. The expenses are out of control. They need someone who can come in, assess everything honestly, and make tough decisions without destroying morale entirely. That's a delicate balance, Naomi agreed. People are more likely to accept difficult changes if they understand the reasoning and feel like the process is fair. They talked strategy for 40 minutes. Julian was sharp, asking insightful questions and building on her suggestions. He had clearly done his homework on her work with TechVista. But he never mentioned her divorce or the lawsuit or any of the personal drama that had circulated through industry gossip. It was refreshing. This has been incredibly helpful, Julian said as their time ran out. Would you be willing to consult on this project? Obviously I'd compensate you for your time. And your firm would get credit for any successful outcomes. Naomi considered. She didn't usually do outside consulting. Bennett Capital kept her busy enough. But the project sounded interesting, and Julian seemed like someone she could work with professionally. Send me the details, she said. I'll review them and let you know if I can make time in my schedule. They exchanged contact information and parted ways. Naomi went to her next panel and didn't think much more about it. But that evening, she received an email from Julian with a detailed brief on the consulting project. It was thorough and well organized, clearly representing weeks of analysis. The company in question was indeed a good candidate for restructuring. The work would be challenging but manageable. She replied, "This looks like a solid project. I can commit to 10 hours a week for the next 2 months. My rates are attached." His response came within an hour. Perfect. Let's set up a kickoff call for next week. Over the following months, Naomi found herself working closely with Julian on the consulting project. Their weekly video calls were efficient and productive. He respected her expertise, implemented her suggestions, and provided thoughtful feedback. The project was going well. The target company was responding positively to the restructuring plan and showing early signs of improvement. But more than that, Naomi found she actually enjoyed working with Julian. His approach to business aligned with hers, ethical, strategic, focused on sustainable success rather than quick profits. He was funny in a dry, understated way. He asked good questions and actually listened to the answers. In October, they met in person again for a progress review at the target company. They spent the day touring facilities, meeting with department heads, reviewing implementation. That evening, Julian suggested dinner to debrief. Over Italian food at a quiet restaurant, they discussed the project's successes and challenges. But as the meal progressed, the conversation drifted to more personal territory. "Can I ask you something off the record?" Julian said as they waited for dessert. "Sure. How do you maintain optimism about people after dealing with situations like TechVista? I read about the lawsuit. It must have been frustrating to face legal action after making sound business decisions." Naomi appreciated that he didn't ask about her divorce directly. "I try to remember that most people act from their own pain and fear rather than malice. The person who sued wasn't really angry at me personally. She was angry at her circumstances and I was a convenient target. That's a remarkably generous interpretation. Maybe. Or maybe I just don't want to become cynical." Naomi paused. "I could let those experiences make me bitter. Assume everyone has an agenda. Trust no one. But that would mean they won. They'd have changed who I am. I refuse to give them that power." Julian studied her with open admiration. "I think that takes remarkable strength." The dinner ended with a handshake and plans for their next check-in call. But something had shifted. Naomi felt it as she drove home that evening, a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. Not attraction exactly. Or not just attraction. But possibility. The sense that maybe, eventually, she could trust someone again. She didn't act on it. Didn't pursue it. But she didn't close herself off to it either. By November, the consulting project was wrapping up successfully. The target company was showing significant improvement. Julian's firm was getting excellent feedback. Bennett Capital was being praised for the ethical approach to restructuring. "We should celebrate," Julian said during their final project call. "Dinner? My treat. You've earned it." Naomi smiled at her computer screen. "Professional dinner or personal dinner?" There was a pause. Then Julian laughed. "How about we start with professional and see where it goes?" They met at a steakhouse downtown. The conversation flowed easily from business to books to travel to philosophy. Julian was divorced 3 years ago. Amicable, he said, just two people who wanted different things. No kids. No drama. "I'm cautious about relationships now," he admitted. "I don't jump into anything without really thinking it through." "I understand that completely," Naomi said. I'm not even sure I want to be in a relationship again. The last one ended badly enough to make me question the whole concept. Can I ask what happened? Or is that too personal? Naomi considered. She had told this story so many times, to lawyers, to friends, to colleagues who asked. But she had never told it to someone who might matter to her future. My husband had an affair, she said simply, with someone who worked at a company I had just acquired. The timing was complicated. The divorce was messy. And I'm still figuring out what I want next. Julian nodded slowly. That sounds painful. I'm sorry. I'm not. Not anymore. It taught me a lot about boundaries and self-worth. About not settling for people who don't value you. She met his eyes across the table. I'm okay being alone. I need to be okay being alone before I can be with anyone else. That's very self-aware. Julian smiled. For what it's worth, I'm okay being alone too. But I'm also open to not being alone with the right person. No rush. No pressure. Just possibility. Possibility. That word again. It felt less frightening now than it had a few months ago. They finished dinner and said goodbye in the parking lot. Julian didn't try to kiss her or ask for a date or push for anything more. He just said, let me know if you'd like to have coffee sometime. No professional agenda. Just two people who enjoy talking to each other. I'd like that, Naomi said. She drove home feeling lighter than she had in years. Not because Julian was some perfect romance, but because he represented something she had stopped believing in, the possibility that not everyone would betray her. That trust could be rebuilt slowly, carefully, with someone who respected boundaries and understood her caution. Over the following weeks they texted occasionally. Nothing heavy or flirtatious. Just interesting articles they'd read or funny observations about work. It was easy and uncomplicated. In late November, Naomi accepted his invitation to a gallery opening. Then to a concert. Then to a casual Sunday brunch. None of it felt like pressure or performance. Just two people getting to know each other without expectations. By December they were seeing each other regularly. Nothing serious. Nothing rushed. But something genuine and growing at its own pace. Patricia noticed the change in Naomi. You seem happy, she commented one morning. I am, Naomi said, surprised to realize it was true. Things are good right now. Work is good. Life is good. Is there someone? Patricia asked with a knowing smile. Maybe. Eventually. We'll see. Naomi wasn't ready to share details yet. This thing with Julian felt too new, too precious to expose to scrutiny. I'm taking it slow. Smart, Patricia said. After everything, you deserve to be careful. Naomi agreed. She did deserve to be careful. But she also deserved to be happy. To be open to possibility. To not let Garrett's betrayal define her entire future. She was building a new life. One where her worth wasn't tied to a marriage or defined by someone else's choices. One where she was successful and independent and, slowly, learning to trust again. It felt like victory in a way that revenge never could. 1 year after the divorce, Naomi stood in front of her bathroom mirror adjusting her earrings. The reflection showed a woman transformed, not physically, but in some essential way that had nothing to do with appearance. She looked confident. Content. At peace with herself in a way she hadn't been during her marriage. Tonight was the Bennett Capital Annual Charity Gala, the biggest event on the company's social calendar. 500 guests from the business and philanthropic communities gathering to celebrate the year's successes and raise money for educational initiatives. Naomi had attended this event for 6 consecutive years, always with Garrett on her arm, always feeling slightly uncomfortable in the performance of it all. This year Julian would be her date. They had been seeing each other for 4 months now, slowly building something that felt solid and real. He understood her need for independence. He respected her career. He never made her feel guilty for working late or prioritizing important meetings. He had his own successful company, his own busy life, his own complete identity that didn't require her to fill any gaps. They were partners, not dependencies. It was healthier than anything Naomi had experienced before. You look beautiful, Julian said from the bedroom doorway. He was already dressed in his tuxedo, looking distinguished and calm. Ready? Ready, Naomi confirmed, smoothing her navy blue gown. It was elegant without being flashy, professional without being boring. She had chosen it carefully, aware that tonight would be full of people who knew her history and would be watching to see how she had survived the past year. They arrived at the hotel ballroom fashionably late. The event was already in full swing, champagne flowing, string quartet playing, hundreds of guests mingling in evening wear. Naomi spotted colleagues and clients and board members. She took Julian's arm and stepped into the crowd. The evening passed in a pleasant blur of conversations and connections. People complimented Bennett Capital's successful year. They praised the TechVista integration. They asked about new acquisition targets. Several women pulled Naomi aside to tell her quietly that they admired how she had handled her divorce, how she had maintained her professionalism, how she had emerged stronger. "You're an inspiration," one woman said, a CFO Naomi had worked with on a different project. "My husband thinks I work too much. Seeing you thrive on your own makes me feel less guilty about prioritizing my career." Naomi squeezed her hand. "Never feel guilty for being good at what you do." At 8 p.m., the formal program began. Bennett Capital's CEO gave a speech about the company's achievements. Patricia was recognized for 10 years of exceptional service. Naomi received an award for her leadership on the TechVista acquisition and the firm's overall growth. She accepted it with grace, giving credit to her team and emphasizing the importance of ethical business practices. As she returned to her seat, Julian squeezed her hand. "You earned that," he said quietly. "All of it." She had. She really had. Despite everything, she had done excellent work this year. She had proven that personal turmoil didn't have to derail professional success. She had shown that being hurt didn't mean being broken. It was at 9:30 during the dessert course that Naomi saw them. Garrett and Sienna standing near the entrance, clearly debating whether to come in. Garrett was wearing an ill-fitting tuxedo that had probably been rented. Sienna wore a dress that was too flashy for the event, too obviously trying to impress. They looked out of place among the understated wealth and quiet confidence of the room. Naomi watched as they finally entered, hovering at the edge of the crowd. Garrett was scanning the room, probably looking for people he used to know through Naomi. Friends who had dropped him after the divorce. Colleagues who had sided with her when they learned the truth. "Is that him?" Julian asked, following her gaze. She had told him the whole story over the months they had been seeing each other. He knew about Garrett's cheating, the divorce, the attempted lawsuits, the confrontations. "That's him," Naomi confirmed. "And her. Do you want to leave?" "No." Naomi turned her attention back to her dessert. "We're not leaving because they're here. This is my event, my company, my night. If anyone should leave, it's them." Julian smiled at that. "Good answer." Across the room, Garrett had spotted her. She watched him say something to Sienna, watched Sienna's expression shift from nervous to angry. They were having an argument right there at the edge of the elegant ballroom. Naomi turned away. Whatever was happening in their relationship wasn't her concern. She had heard through the grapevine that things weren't going well. Garrett's job situation remained unstable. Sienna had taken a position far below her previous role. Money was tight. The wedding had been pushed back indefinitely. Their love story, built on betrayal and stolen moments, was buckling under the weight of reality. But Naomi didn't feel satisfaction at their struggles. She didn't feel vindication or triumph. She just felt distant. Like they were characters in a story she used to care about but had since moved on from. "Naomi." She turned to find Garrett standing beside their table. Up close, he looked worse than he had from across the room. Thinner. Tired. The cocky confidence he used to carry had evaporated, replaced by something desperate and diminished. "Garrett," she said evenly, "I'm surprised to see you here. I still have friends in the industry. One of them invited me." He glanced at Julian, then back at her. "Can we talk? Privately?" "No." Naomi's voice was pleasant but firm. "There's nothing we need to discuss. Please. Just 5 minutes. I need to explain." "You don't need to explain anything. It's over. We're divorced. What you do now is your business." She gestured to Julian. "This is Julian Reeves. Julian, this is Garrett Phillips. My ex-husband." Julian stood and shook Garrett's hand with perfect politeness. "Nice to meet you." Garrett looked between them, clearly thrown by how comfortable they were together. How happy Naomi seemed. "You're dating already?" "I don't think my personal life is any of your concern," Naomi said. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For how things ended. For the things I said. I was angry and I took it out on you when you were just protecting yourself." The words came out rushed and rehearsed. "And I wanted to ask if there was any way you could help Sienna find work. She's really struggling." "Garrett, stop." Naomi cut him off. "I'm not going to help Sienna. I'm not going to help you. You made your choices. These are your consequences. I've moved on with my life and I suggest you do the same with yours. But we're struggling. The divorce settlement left me with nothing. We can barely afford rent. The divorce settlement gave you exactly what you were entitled to under the prenup you signed. If you're struggling financially, that's because you spent 8 years not building a career while I supported you. Naomi kept her voice low but clear. I don't owe you anything. Not money, not help, not sympathy. You cheated on me, lied to me, tried to take everything I had worked for, and then acted like I was the villain for protecting myself. I'm done with that narrative. Garrett's face flushed. I'm trying to apologize. I don't want your apology. I want you to leave me alone. Naomi stood, Julian rising beside her. This is my event at my company with my colleagues. You shouldn't be here. Please go. For a moment, Garrett looked like he might argue. Then his shoulders slumped. He nodded once and walked away back to where Sienna was waiting. Naomi watched them have another brief, heated conversation before they left together, disappearing through the ballroom doors. You okay? Julian asked softly. I'm perfect, Naomi said and meant it. Seeing Garrett diminished and desperate should have felt like victory. But it just felt like closure. He was no longer the man she had loved or the villain in her story. He was just someone she used to know who had made bad choices and was living with the consequences. She had moved on. Truly, completely moved on. The rest of the evening passed beautifully. Naomi danced with Julian, laughed with her colleagues, celebrated the year's successes. She felt light and free in a way she hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. As they left the gala around midnight, walking to the car under the bright city lights, Julian put his arm around her shoulders. That was quite an evening, he said. It was. Naomi leaned into him slightly. Thank you for being there. For not making it weird when he showed up. You handled it perfectly. You didn't need me for that. Julian opened the car door for her. But I'm glad I could be there anyway. They drove through the quiet streets, the city peaceful at this late hour. Naomi looked out the window and thought about how different her life was now compared to a year ago. Then she had been discovering her husband's betrayal, gathering evidence, preparing for battle. She had been hurt and angry and determined to protect herself. Now she was just happy, genuinely content with her life. Do you ever regret it? Julian asked as they pulled up to her house. The divorce, I mean. Even knowing everything, do you ever wish you'd tried to make it work? Naomi considered the question seriously. No. I regret that I didn't see the truth sooner. I regret wasting 8 years on someone who didn't value me. But I don't regret leaving once I knew. That was the best decision I made. Good. Julian smiled. Because you deserve someone who sees your worth. Who appreciates what you bring to a relationship. Who doesn't need you to be less so they can feel like more. They sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. Then Julian turned to her. I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. I wanted you to know that. No pressure. No expectations. But I wanted to be honest. Naomi's breath caught. She had been so careful, so guarded, so determined not to rush into anything. But hearing those words, she realized she felt the same way. Not the desperate, codependent love she had confused for partnership with Garrett. But something steadier. Something that made her feel stronger rather than smaller. I'm falling in love with you too, she said. It terrifies me. But in a good way. They kissed in the driveway, soft and unhurried. When they pulled apart, Naomi felt certain of something she hadn't been sure of in a long time. She could trust again. Not blindly, not foolishly, but carefully and deliberately with someone who had earned it. Come inside, she said. Let's have coffee and talk about the future. Our future. Julian smiled. I'd like that. As they walked to the door together, Naomi glanced back at the empty street. Somewhere out there, Garrett and Sienna were dealing with their own struggles. But that wasn't her story anymore. She had written her own ending, one where she emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for something real. The house was dark as they entered, but Naomi turned on the lights one by one, illuminating the space she had reclaimed as solely hers. It was beautiful, peaceful. A home rather than just a house. Coffee or wine? She asked Julian as they settled in the living room. Wine, he said. We're celebrating. What are we celebrating? You. Your success. Your strength. Your ability to turn pain into power. Julian accepted the glass she handed him. And if I'm being selfish, I'm celebrating that I found you when you were ready to be found. They talked until 2 in the morning, making plans and sharing dreams. Julian wanted to expand his consulting firm. Naomi was considering a promotion to managing director that would give her even more authority at Bennett Capital. They talked about travel, places they wanted to see, experiences they wanted to share. They talked about keeping their independence while building something together. It was the kind of conversation Naomi had never been able to have with Garrett. He had always needed her to be smaller, to need him, to center her life around his fragile ego. Julian wanted her to be exactly who she was: ambitious, successful, strong. When he finally left around 3 a.m., Naomi stood in her doorway and watched him drive away. Then she closed the door and leaned against it, smiling in the darkness. 1 year ago she had been devastated. 6 months ago she had been angry. 3 months ago she had been healing. Now she was thriving. The next morning, Naomi woke early and went for a run. The autumn air was crisp and clear, leaves crunching under her feet. She ran her usual route through the neighborhood, pushing herself harder than normal, feeling the burn in her muscles and the strength in her stride. When she returned home, she showered and dressed for the day even though it was Sunday. She had learned that maintaining structure and purpose made her happy. She didn't need lazy days anymore. She needed goals and challenges and reasons to get up and be excellent. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Saw you at the gala last night. You looked amazing. Julian is wonderful. So happy for you." Naomi replied, "Thank you. I'm happy too. Really happy." Another text came through, this one from Miranda. "Heard your ex showed up at the gala. Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Naomi typed back. "He's not my problem anymore." She spent the day working on a presentation for the board, reviewing acquisition targets for the next quarter, and planning her schedule for the upcoming week. In the afternoon, Julian called to invite her to dinner at his place. "I'm cooking," he said. "Fair warning, I'm decent but not amazing in the kitchen." "I'll risk it," Naomi said, laughing. That evening at Julian's modern downtown apartment, they cooked together, or rather, Julian cooked while Naomi kept him company and chopped vegetables. They ate on his balcony overlooking the city lights, talking about everything and nothing. "Can I ask you something?" Julian said as they cleared the dishes. "What was the moment you knew you were going to be okay? After the divorce, when did you realize you'd survive this?" Naomi thought back. It was during the lawsuit. When Sienna was trying to sue for wrongful termination and Garrett was calling demanding I help her. I realized I had been so afraid of being seen as the villain that I was letting them control my narrative. But then I just stopped caring what they thought. I knew I had acted with integrity. I knew my decisions were sound. Their opinion of me didn't matter anymore. That must have been liberating. It was. It still is. Naomi leaned against the counter. I spent 8 years trying to be the perfect wife for someone who didn't appreciate it. I supported his dreams, paid his bills, made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. And when that ended, I had to remember who I was before him, who I could be without him. "And who are you?" Julian asked, moving closer. "I'm someone who doesn't need anyone else to complete her, who can be in a relationship without losing herself, who knows her worth isn't tied to whether someone else loves her." Naomi met his eyes. "I'm someone who survived betrayal and came out stronger. And I'm someone who's ready to build something new with someone who deserves her." Julian kissed her then, deep and meaningful. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to spend every day earning that," he said. "I promise you that." "Good," Naomi whispered. "Because I don't settle anymore. I won't diminish myself for anyone. If this is going to work, it works with me as I am, ambitious, busy, successful, and unwilling to compromise on what matters to me. I wouldn't want you any other way." They stayed up late talking about the future. Not promises or commitments, but possibilities. Maybe they would move in together eventually. Maybe they would travel to Europe next summer. Maybe they would build something lasting. Or maybe not. Maybe this relationship would run its course too. But if it did, Naomi knew she would survive. She had already proven to herself that she could handle anything. She had lost a marriage and kept her integrity. She had been betrayed and remained strong. She had been called cold and calculating and had refused to let those words define her. She had won. Not because Garrett and Sienna were struggling. Not because she had more money or success or happiness than they did. But because she had refused to let their betrayal break her. She had protected herself, maintained her standards, and built a life she was proud of. That was victory. That was revenge in its purest form, living well, loving fully, and never letting the people who hurt you determine your worth. 3 months later, in early spring, Naomi was promoted to managing director of Bennett Capital. It was the culmination of years of hard work, successful acquisitions, and proven leadership. She celebrated with her team, with Julian, with the handful of people who had supported her through the hardest year of her life. At the celebration dinner, Patricia raised her glass in a toast. "To Naomi, the smartest, strongest, most resilient woman I know. You earned every bit of this success." Naomi looked around the table at her team, at Julian sitting beside her with quiet pride in his eyes, at the life she had built from the wreckage of her marriage. She thought about Garrett and Sienna briefly, heard they had finally called off their engagement, heard they had gone their separate ways, heard that karma had delivered its own justice without her having to lift a finger. But those were just footnotes in a story that was no longer about them. The story was about her. About resilience and strength and refusing to be diminished. About protecting yourself without apology. About knowing your worth and never settling for less than you deserve. Thank you, Naomi said, raising her own glass. To all of you. And to new beginnings. They drank to that, and Naomi felt the last piece of hurt finally release from her chest. She was free. Truly, completely free. The divorce had been the end of one chapter. But this promotion, this relationship, this life she had built on her own terms, this was the beginning of something so much better. She had wanted revenge and she had gotten it. Not through destruction or retaliation, but through her own success. Through refusing to be broken. Through building a life so full and rich and happy that her past couldn't touch it. That was the best revenge of all. And it felt like flying.